Northern Rockies Coordination Center has issued their first fire weather forecast for the Northern Rockies, including Montana. Now keep in mind this is an early look. The data is still being analyzed here a little bit. This will likely change, but I just want to give you an early look at where the data is taking us. So let's jump into the details. The Northern Rockies Coordination Center had analyzed the 7 biggest fire seasons in the last 20 years, and the biggest fire season, it was last year. We burned over 1.5 million acres in the Northern Rockies, and you can see the stats for 2017. 3,900 fires burned, again about 1.5 million acres in the Northern Rockies. So that was a pretty intense fire season last year, and it came to an abrupt end when the La Nina started kicking in September, and we tapped into some very cold and wet weather beginning late September. Brought a quick end to the fire season, and that was beneficial. So that La Nina pattern not only helped put an end to the fire season last year, but it has produced a wonderful, cold, snowy season for Montana. And in fact, our snowpack is some of the most incredible and highest snow water equivalent percent of average values in the entire country. We're still running at about 125 to 165% of average across most areas of Montana. And with La Nina continuing to weaken, reaching a neutral state by the end of spring, well, the impacts are still ongoing with cooler than normal projected temperatures according to the Climate Prediction Center for April, May, and June. That would be wonderful if that could slow down that higher mountain snowpack from coming out too early, and near normal to slightly above normal on the precipitation side of things. So let's jump into the forecast details. They're projecting a normal green up in April, May, and June, and if we continue to see normal precipitation or slightly above, that's really going to help things out a little bit there as well. But the longer range forecast, as we reach a neutral state in the equatorial Pacific, normal La Nina pulling us in one direction or another, we typically find a return of hot and dry weather. In July, August, and September, according to the Climate Prediction Center, below normal precipitation likely across western Montana, and above normal temperatures likely across much of the western U.S., but that does include the western half of Montana as well. So their forecast for July through August is above normal on fire behavior. As things dry out and the heat turns up, western, southwestern Montana is going to be possibly looking at another bad fire season, near normal in central and eastern Montana. Now, some good news and bad news. First, a later start is projected if, and this is a big if, we see cool, wet weather continue into April, May, and early June. If that continues, and we see a normal rainy season in May and June, we'll get a later start possibly into early July. But we don't have that luxury like last year, so the season could be extended into September, early October. La Nina won't be putting the fires out early this year because there won't be any La Nina impacts for Montana. So that's the good news, bad news. And some data, some facts that they're passing along, they're blaming climate change for the hot, dry summers. This is going to be the norm, not the abnorm. And they're saying that temperatures are increasing roughly around 4 degrees since 1948 for the summer season, and fire seasons are about 80 days longer compared to where they were at in the early 1970s. So that's quite interesting on that fact as well. Why? Well, stronger high-pressure ridge patterns are building during the summer and early fall months. That locks us into an incredibly hot and dry weather pattern. So climate change is one key factor in those strong high-pressure blocking patterns over the western United States, including Montana. But one of the other factors that's locking in those big ridge patterns is the Arctic sea ice in the North Pole area, up there in the northern Arctic, continues to dwindle. And because you don't have as big disparity from the cold poles to the warm equator, we don't have as much variety there, and that's basically giving us a stalled weather pattern across the western half of the United States, and they're saying that these terrible fire seasons could be more frequent as we look out into the next 20 to 50 years. Anyway, this year's weather and climate for the fire season may be a later start, but again, the season could go a little longer into September and early October. Once they update this in the next 30 days, they'll update it once a month. We'll give you the latest information to pass along here online and on air on KXLF and KBZK.com, and of course on the Storm Tracker Weather mobile apps.